All right, let's start with Thursday Night Football, one of the more intriguing games on the slate this week. Ravens and Bengals. Let's start with the Baltimore Ravens. So the Ravens survive by the skin of their teeth this week, but, they did make a double-digit comeback, so, good for them. They did what they needed to do. They fought back when they needed to fight back, and it's hard to get too upset, at least on their perspective, or from their perspective, with the controversial way this game ended up kind of being decided. Now, they do sweep the season series with the Bengals, even though, amazingly, they gave up a combined 72 points to the Bengals in their two meetings, and they ended up closing it out with a margin of victory of a total of 4 points in those two games. But nonetheless, the Ravens are 2-0, and they continue to lead in that division. Well, not really, because, of course, Pittsburgh has to ruin everything, but they should be leading that division, and they may have a chance to when they play the Steelers on Sunday. And for the Bengals, this one hurts more than most. No, not only just because you lost to a division rival and ended up losing the season series and getting swept by them, not only because you were up by double digits at one point early in this game, not only because you got another MVP caliber performance from your quarterback, Joe Burrow, and of course from Ja'Marr Chase as well. And in fact, not only because, speaking of which, you got one of the best receiving performances in the history of the NFL by Ja'Marr Chase, but also because the referees missed two blatant penalties on the Ravens on the last play of their drive for the Bengals. Now, could the Ravens have still won the game without it? Absolutely. The Bengals would have had to have come through regardless of those penalties being called. They would not have scored on those penalties. They would have still had to score, and you never know what can happen. But at the end of the day, they would have gotten another chance. The referees missed a blatant holding call on the Ravens in the secondary. Mike Gesicki got held running his route. They did not call it. And also, they seem to have missed a roughing the passer call on that same exact play. But, of course, they called neither. The Ravens end up escaping. So this one just hurts if you are the Bengals. And now they sit at 4-6, despite the fact that in today's NFL, they have a top 3 passing offense, which usually is an indicator of a pretty successful team in the current state of the NFL. But unfortunately for the Bengals, not this year. And the reason is because of everything else. They have a bottom 5 rushing offense. They have a bottom 5 defense. They have a bottom 10 offensive line. They are just not good at any other phase of the game right now. And at this point, it's safe to say that Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase are getting absolutely no help, whether it's from that defense, whether it's from that offensive line, whether it's from the running game. They are getting no help. And it really is a shame because I thought the Bengals could be really, really good this year. It's just been a catastrophe on every single part of the team except for those two. All right, Panthers and Giants in Germany up next. Let's start with the Panthers. 2 wins in a row for the mighty, mighty Panthers. Bryce Young continues to lean heavily on the running game, and why wouldn't he, as Chuba Hubbard continues to tell young Jonathan Brooks to sit your butt on the bench, and you will get up when I tell you to. And while Bryce Young's numbers were not that impressive by any means, only about 150 yards, 1 touchdown, only about 10 to 12 completions, not a very impressive stat line whatsoever, he looks miles ahead of where he was to start the season and obviously where he was last season. And so at this point, I see no reason to move on from him. I see no reason for when Andy Dalton does come back, if he's back already, for Andy Dalton to reclaim that starting job. As long as Bryce Young continues to make progress and continues to not look absolutely terrible, not turn the ball over like crazy, and not make terrible decisions with the football, he should continue to start for the Panthers, and hopefully that means continued success for the rest of the season for them. As for the Giants, they lose to the Panthers in absolutely heartbreaking fashion. One of the only real bright spots to this team this year has been the emergence of rookie running back Tyrone Tracy Jr. He is becoming a young star, not only for the Giants, but in the NFL. He's been one of the most effective running backs over the last 4 to 5 weeks in the entirety of the NFL. He got the ball in overtime after a fantastic game. He's really the only reason that they were in this game on offense. and he fumbled the ball while they were in field goal range in overtime. And of course, the Panthers take that, they drive down, they kick the game-winning field goal, and end up winning in overtime. And so you have to feel for him. He has literally carried this offense over the last few weeks, and of course in this game, as I mentioned. And yeah, it's really a shame. Hopefully his teammates picked him up and told them how much they love him and how invaluable he is to this team right now, because literally without him they have nothing. Devin Singletary's fine, but he had a lot of turnover problems as well, and he had been pretty inconsistent throughout the season. So, and you have to wonder at this point, have we seen the last of Daniel Jones? Adam Schefter this morning talked about how he is guessing. Now, obviously, I don't know if there's necessarily any evidence to back this up outside of Brian Daboll saying they are evaluating everything, including the quarterback position. I don't know if there's much evidence to say that Daniel Jones will be benched after their bye week, but you have to wonder, is this the last we've seen of Daniel Jones as a New York Giant? We all know that my hope is absolutely, please get him out of there and replace him with a top draft pick, because you're going to have a top 5 draft pick this year. You can take one of the top quarterbacks. You could take your Shedeur Sanders. You could take Cam Ward. You could take Jalen Milroe, whoever you feel like it should be. So yeah, I hope that it is for the Giants' sake, because, again, I talked about it last week. He's about 75 games into his career, and he's still out there. He's still turning the ball over. This was another multiple turnover, 0 touchdown game for him. Just move on. Just move on already, please. Okay, 49ers and Bucks are up next. This was a really eventful and really fun game to watch, so let's start with the 49ers. It's really nice to see Christian McCaffrey back, and while he did not get a full playload and workload in this game, he did actually get every touch of the running backs, of the running back room, except for 2. Each of the other 2 running backs for the San Francisco 49ers got 1 touch apiece, and so Christian McCaffrey clearly has reestablished himself as the alpha dog in that room. And so, again, he was taken out quite a bit on plays that they weren't really going to go to him, just to kind of get him rest, because it was somewhere around 100 degrees in Tampa Bay this weekend. It was quite hot. The commentators alluded to it oftentimes throughout the game. But this was a disaster all the way around for the 49ers despite the win. 3 missed field goals, a muffed punt. I will say maybe it wasn't a disaster for the offense or the defense. It was mostly a disaster for the special teams. And honestly, it feels like the 49ers had no business making this a close game. But again, the special teams really kept the Bucks in it all day. But at the end, Jake Moody overcame it all, and he hit the game-winning field goal as time expired in order for the 49ers to escape barely with a win. And the Niners hope to keep on rolling as they get healthier and healthier and healthier towards the second half of the season. This team has historically been a second half team, and so they hope to continue that trend this year. And for the Buccaneers, you honestly have to feel for the Bucs. I mean, you lost your 2 top wide receivers during the most difficult stretch of your season schedule-wise, and they keep on fighting and fighting and fighting for their lives, only to lose close game after close game after close game. The only good thing here is that the Falcons did also lose, and so they end up keeping pace in the division from where they were, because if you were 4 games back from the Falcons and you only had, somewhere around 6 or 7 weeks left in the season, that may be an insurmountable lead. But if they can get some momentum after their bye week, maybe the Falcons drop another game next week. Who knows? They can kind of continue to get healthier. It seems that Mike Evans is going to come back after the bye. At least that's what they're predicting right now. And so if the Bucs can get some momentum after this long stretch of difficult schedule, maybe they can make a run for it. Bills and Colts, Bills and Colts, Bills and Colts up next. Let's start with the Bills. The offense didn't really play particularly well in this one, despite putting up another 30-point effort. I feel like I've said that multiple times this year, where you sit there and think, man, the offense doesn't really look that great. Man, Josh Allen doesn't really look that great. The running game doesn't really look that great, and yet suddenly you look up and there's 30-plus points on the board. It's pretty nuts. But Allen, again, didn't play all that well, again, the whole offense did not play very well, but when you end up forcing, I think it was 4 turnovers, you're going to have a really good day at the offense, and you're probably going to, end up being pretty successful, unless, of course, your name is the Texans, but we'll get to that later. The defensive showings over the last few weeks have got me really excited. The defense showed out again. They have become a little bit more consistent week to week than they were. They're not quite as volatile. At least they haven't been over the last few weeks. And they seem to be hitting their stride on that end of the field as the season rolls along. The Colts are in a really tough spot right now. They're kind of in between what they should do at quarterback. Is Joe Flacco good enough to take over? Should we go back to Anthony Richardson? The team as a whole is just mediocre. Their defense is mediocre. The offense is mediocre. Their best players on that team are mediocre compared to a lot of other teams' best players. And, in a crowded AFC, they're going to have to do a lot more than just be mediocre in order to kind of keep pace in the wild card. They're not in a terrible spot just yet, but a lot of teams are, only 1 or 2 games behind them, and so you really got to wonder if you're the Colts, whether you're going to be able to hang on or whether you can improve. All right, next up, my New England Patriots taking on the Chicago Bears in Chicago. Let's start with the Patriots. They win pretty handily here, which is not something that I have said very often over the last couple of years. And even though the Patriots have fallen sharply out of the race for that number 1 pick, it was nice to see a dominant win for once, I have to admit. As somebody who has come out and very publicly said, I hope that we go 0-17 so that we can get the number 1 pick, trade back, and get like 5 first-round picks for it. It is nice to, not have a Sunday where you're embarrassed to be a Patriots fan because they stink so bad. So that was really, really nice. And, of course, it also helps when you go up against the number 1 pick, the team that could have taken Drake May at number 1 and decided, of course, to go with Caleb Williams. May has looked, speaking of May, he's looked poised, he's looked calm and collected. He seems to really do a good job of learning from his mistakes. He's still a rookie, so he does make some dumb throws every once in a while, but that's going to happen as you're growing, as he kind of learns. He's going to get it figured out. But again, those mistakes that he makes, he learns from them rather quickly, and there has never been any question of his talent, and there's never been any question that he has played excellent. It's the entire rest of the team around him that has struggled. But in this game, the defense played fantastic. It was by far the best defensive game of the season for the Patriots. They were flying to the ball. They were smothering each and every play that the Chicago Bears ran in the run, in the pass. DJ Moore was just struggling against Christian Gonzalez. He could not get any kind of separation. Keenan Allen was a virtual non-factor. Rome Odunze was a virtual non-factor. And it is not a lack of talent that the Bears have that the Patriots played well. This was just a dominant showing from the defense. So congrats to them. And so at this point, the only question I'm going to have is, can they keep this momentum up? And hopefully, can Drake May continue to perform well and stay healthy at the same time? The Bears are broken and busted right now. The offensive line is in complete shambles. They looked horrible this weekend. The entire offense is in shambles, quite frankly. And the defense, while they are still playing pretty well this year, they're not bad. They're hovering around that top 10 range. At this point, it doesn't really matter because the offense has been so atrociously bad throughout this season that they can't stay in games because the offense is only putting up 3 points here, 6 points here, 9 points here, 11 points here. Like it's been one of these seasons where the offense has just really let the defense down. And so the offense, if they continue to rank among the basement or the cellar of the NFL, this team is just going to end up having another high draft pick. And hopefully they use it on some offensive linemen because there's plenty in the draft and Lord knows they need it. All right, Chiefs and Broncos coming up next. Let's talk about the Chiefs. Yep, Chiefs win again. LOL, doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Always win, never lose. Sorry about that. Just not feeling too good, But seriously, can we figure out a way to beat these guys? Please? Their offense is not even that good. Please. And man, a heartbreaker if you are the Denver Broncos. Honestly, they played way better this week than last week, and I actually think they played better than the Chiefs in this game, but as usual, it doesn't matter. Chiefs win, lol. Okay, Saints and Falcons, a division rivalry on the docket, and the Saints pull off what I think is a pretty big upset, in this season. Maybe even the biggest upset outside of the Raiders beating the Ravens all season long. But let's start with those New Orleans Saints. The Saints, again, pull off a huge upset. They stopped their losing streak. I believe it was up to 7 games or maybe even 8 games before coming into this one, and they get back in the win column. What a game from Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He is back on the radar, at least for 1 week. And the defense, without their former All-Pro defensive back, Marshawn Lattimore, that they traded to the Commanders this past trade deadline, they still played excellent. And beating a division rival when they are on an absolute roll and you are not is always going to feel good. Yeah, and if you're the Falcons, you simply cannot afford to lose this game. They essentially had one really bad quarter where they gave up 17 points, and they played really well on defense for the rest of the game. The pass rush went right back to being completely ineffective and just basically a non-factor in this one, so that's a little bit frustrating if you're the Falcons. You thought you made progress last week, doesn't really seem like you did. The passing game fell off a cliff as compared to the last few weeks, but you know what? The good news is because the Bucs also lost, they still are 3 games up in the division from the rest of the crowd, and you know, the defense is continuing to play mostly well other than that pass rush, so there are some things to build off of, but yeah, you really should have won this game. Okay, battle of 2 of the best teams in the NFL record-wise this season, and leave it up to the Pittsburgh Steelers to ruin all of our fun, so let's start talking about it. Yeah, the Commanders are young, fun, exciting. They are just, you know, everybody's talking about him. Jayden Daniels may win MVP. He's probably going to win Rookie of the Year at the very least, and again, he may win MVP. And then there's the Steelers, who are no fun at all, have Russell Wilson at quarterback, and just win on fundamentals and good defense. And who wins this week? Of course, it's the ones that no one wants to win. And so it is what it is. There's just no justice in the world. But you know, as much as I sometimes can't stand the Steelers, I have to give credit where credit is due. Russell Wilson, while boring and while older and while nowhere near what he used to be, he is starting to get better each and every single week. He's played really, really well since he's taken the job over from Justin Fields. I believe they are 3-0 since he has started, and so, you know, can't really complain too much there. The defense is great. Obviously, we all know how good TJ Watt is, but the secondary has been excellent this year. And their run game with Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, that kind of two-headed monster back there, is one of the best in the NFL. And this team, at this point, has a shot to go pretty far in the playoffs if they continue this pace and they continue to play this way. But this is a huge test for them as they get to play the Ravens this weekend. Tough to get too upset about this game if you're the Commanders. This is obviously a game you want to pull out just to keep pace in the division with the Eagles. But at the end of the day, you played really well. It's not somebody that's, you know, in your division or anything. You lost a really close one on a last-minute fantastic play. And they have a chance to come out and still take control of their division on Thursday Night Football against the Eagles. Vikings and Jaguars, a game that I think all of us expected to be a blowout, and it was anything but. Let's start with the Vikings. The Vikings offense had a terrible, no good, very bad day, and yet they still found a way to win. And if they have any sense in that front office or in that locker room, every single person on offense would get on their hands and knees. Go ahead, do that right now. And you would kiss the feet of every single person on defense, because without that defense, they are barely a 500 team this year. And they do not win on Sunday without that defense. They do not win a lot of the games that they have won this year without their defense. And let's be real. Against any other team, pretty much any other week than this week, against this team, the Vikings lose this game, and they are embarrassed, and they get to, you know, fly home and be super embarrassed, and, you know, they're just going to have to figure out a way to cope with the fact that they lost a super winnable game, but because they played the Jags, because they played them this week, they escape. I firmly believe the Jacksonville Jaguars win this game if they have Trevor Lawrence, but of course they did not, and so they played Mac Jones, who is the equivalent of starting a 4th grader in a high school game at quarterback, and so they lose despite the fact that their defense performed as good, if not better, than any other week they have performed this season, and now they are projected to once again have the number 1 pick in the draft. I don't know if anybody predicted this to start the season, but that's just where we're at right now. Chargers and Titans is the next game up on the docket. Let's start with the Chargers. The Chargers continue to absolutely feast on the basement dwellers of the NFL this year. They have beaten so far the Browns, the Panthers, the Raiders, the Saints, and now the Titans. All 5 of those teams are in the top 10 projected draft picks this year in the NFL. So they are all among the 10 worst teams in the NFL. And their only win coming against a 500 team this year, that came against the Broncos in week 6. And of course, the Broncos are right at 500 as of right now. So it's tough to say how truly good the LA Chargers are at this point. They obviously have a good record, but they need to get some wins against some top tier teams because every decent team, other than the Broncos, that they have played, they have lost to. So they need to prove themselves against better competition. And they're going to have the opportunity to do so over the next few weeks because up and coming on their schedule are, in this order, the Bengals, the Ravens, the Falcons, the Chiefs, the Bucks, and the Broncos again. And so, again, the next 6 weeks, they play pretty good teams. If not the best teams, obviously they play the Chiefs again. So, this is a time for the Chargers to establish themselves and say, hey, we are legit, we are good, we can beat these good teams. So let's see if they can pull it off. As for the Titans, Will Levis is back, though it didn't really seem to help much. The offense continues to sputter, and it seems that the defense, while it was elite to start the year, is getting worse and worse by the week. This is becoming a very, very lost season for them, and if they get a top 10 pick in the draft this year, which it's looking more and more like that's going to happen, you have to wonder if they're going to have to entertain a quarterback at this point. Eagles and Cowboys up next, and this was my favorite game of the weekend. Let's start with the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles absolutely pummel into the turf the Cowboys on this fine Sunday, and they are clicking on all cylinders as they approach their up-and-coming Thursday night football game against the Commanders, and the winner of that game will take control of the division, and so this is a big up-and-coming game for the Eagles, and also, again, for the Commanders to see who is, not necessarily who wins this game is going to win the division, because obviously that's not true, but it's certainly going to help if you win this game. As for the Cowboys, the Cowboys are awful. It's great. Anyways, Cardinals and Jets up next. Another blowout for you. Let's start with the Cardinals. Guys, the Cardinals are back. They were a playoff team a couple of years ago. People seem to have forgotten about that, but they are officially back. Kyler Murray looks absolutely fantastic. These guys are a really, really good football team. They have an excellent run game with Trey Benson and James Conner. They have a really, really good 1-2 punch with the two of them. And their defense has looked a lot better than they are on paper this year. I'm just going to be honest. I did not expect this defense, 10 weeks into the season to be ranked inside the top 10 in terms of total defense. But they are. And again, putting all these pieces together with a good quarterback, with a good run game, with decent weapons, and a top 10 defense, they are legit. The Jets, however, are not legit. They got absolutely annihilated in this one. Their season is effectively over, so I can start saying this now. See you, Aaron. Bye. Have fun in retirement. All right, it's time for one of the other more eventful games of the weekend. It's Sunday Night Football time, Lions and Texans. Let's start with the Detroit Lions. This game was an absolute disaster for the Detroit Lions, and yet they figured out a way to win anyways. They become the first team to have 5 interceptions or throw 5 interceptions in a game and still win since the 1970 season. And this is why I love this team and why I firmly believe that this team not only can win a Super Bowl, but will win the Super Bowl if they don't obviously face the Chiefs, who decide that they will not lose ever again. Against a great Texans team that is also a favorite to, at the very least, compete in the AFC. They are on the road, nothing going your way on offense, and they find a way to win anyways. This team may just win it all. I cannot get enough of watching the Detroit Lions this year. And if you're the Texans, you have to just be sitting there wondering, how in the world did we lose this game? I honestly have no idea how in the world we lost this game. The offense completely stalled out after halftime after looking excellent in the first half. CJ Stroud started making bafflingly awful reads. He had a wide open Tank Dell at one point in the, just like in the front of the end zone. There was no one within 30 yards. CJ Stroud waited so long and then just kind of floated the ball up there to where Carlton Davis got his second interception of the game, despite the fact that for a good 3 seconds, Tank Dell was wide open with no one even, within 20 yards of him. It was crazy. Just a rough loss. But everyone else in the division also lost, so there could be worse outcomes, and they do end up still keeping pace in that division. All right, time for Monday Night Football. I've been waiting all day for Monday night. That's not how the song goes. But let's talk about Dolphins and Rams. Let's start with those Miami Dolphins. I've given the Miami Dolphins defense a lot of crap this year. I said at the beginning of the year that they were going to have a huge fall off. Their defense was not going to be elite this year like it has been over the last couple of years. They were going to really have to lean on their offense, and if so, then that means that they were going to struggle. And for the most part this season, that's been kind of true. But I will admit, last night was by far the best performance of the year for them as a unit on defense. Getting Zach Seiler back from injury seemed to really re-energize that entire defense. He was active all night long. And the offense, while it didn't play particularly well, made enough plays on third down and in the red zone in order to pull out a win. It almost looked like the Rams offense was completely unprepared for what the Dolphins were going to bring last night. And at the same time, they also shot themselves in the foot repeatedly. Turnovers, missing open receivers, not converting on third down or in the red zone at any kind of consistent clip. Another winnable game slips by for the Rams, and this time you cannot blame their health. And, if they don't get things right, especially on offense, because their defense has actually played pretty well. Last night they played well, too. If they don't get it right, at least on offense, New England might just surprise them next week. All right, that's going to do it for my Week 10 NFL recap. Let me know what you guys think about each and every game down in the comments section below.